Let me get your reaction to what we're now learning about who may have been released on the U.S. side for Russia. Ambassador McFaul.
Well, first, I just want to congratulate President Trump and his administration for getting Marc Fogel out of jail. He is a friend of mine. He taught my son when we lived in Moscow when I was a U.S. ambassador. He's a fantastic teacher. He taught many of the kids, diplomats and military officers that were stationed in Moscow when I was there. And this is a great, great day for America. With respect to who was traded, I mean, I've just seen the same reports about this crypto criminal. Frankly, I don't really care. I'm elated that Marc Fogel is out of jail. And I'm a little more worried about what this might mean for negotiations with Ukraine, because what I'm hearing about some comments that have been made today about concessions we're giving the Russians, including pressuring the Ukrainians to give territory and not allowing them to join NATO, that seems far more consequential in terms of a bad deal than whether or not we release this crypto criminal or not.
Well, we know that the administration, though, has been less than transparent about what kind of dealing went on behind the scenes in order to release Fogel. Like you said, though, everyone can celebrate he's been released. Let me play part of what President Trump said about this release as a potential step toward ending the war in Ukraine. Watch.
It could be a big, important part of getting the war over with Ukraine. And we appreciate President Putin's what he did. He was able to pull it off for you, right? He was able to pull it off. We think, and you're here, and you're here, so it was great. We'll tell you a little bit more about it tomorrow, but I think we've made great progress on the war also. Getting the war, I want to get the war ended.
Adding to that, Ambassador, earlier this morning, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the U.S. will not be involved in any peacekeeping missions there, that the return to Ukraine's 2014 borders is, quote, unrealistic, and with NATO membership looking unlikely. How do you see the Trump administration handling potential negotiations to end this war?
I think those comments by the Secretary of Defense today were catastrophic mistakes. You don't give away the things you're negotiating before you begin to negotiate. Why is he telling the Ukrainians they need to give up territory? That should happen if it needs to happen, and tragically, maybe it does. But that should happen at the negotiating table, not before the negotiations begin. Likewise, Ukraine's membership into NATO. First of all, Putin shouldn't be able to negotiate that or not. He's not a member of NATO. But even if you wanted to negotiate that, do that within the context of a negotiation. What are the Ukrainians getting from these concessions? They're getting nothing. I've negotiated with the Russians, and I can tell you, you give them anything, they pocket it, and then they ask for more. So I honestly do not understand this strategy. We should not negotiate ahead of ourselves with ourselves before we sit with the Russians. And of course, the Ukrainians need to be sitting at the table when we are negotiating about the future of their country. We should not be doing it without them present at the table.
Stay with me. I want to go back to Peter Alexander, who has some new reporting. Peter?
Yeah, that's right. This is from my colleague, NBC's senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake, speaking to an American official who now confirms that the Trump administration is releasing a man by the name of Alexander Vinnik, a cyber criminal who last year pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering. It's unclear at this point whether this is described as a trade or an exchange. Nonetheless, it happens in the same time frame, of course, that Marc Fogel was released by the Russians, picked up by the U.S. envoy for Mideast affairs, Steve Witkoff, returned to the United States overnight, where he met with the president here at the White House. You've seen those celebratory scenes at this time. And as we report this out, I think one thing that's worth noting, and I know my colleague, Ambassador Mike McFaul, will detail this, it does appear that this White House feels like this is a unique opportunity to try to build what they view as a strong relationship that President Trump has with Vladimir Putin at this time, which is why I think there have been some sensitivities as we've been asking questions of Witkoff and others over the course of this day, where they were disinclined to share any further detail about any trade or exchange or any Russian being released here. It is clear that, at least in the eyes of this White House, they hope that this is sort of a show of good faith from both sides that will help allow for future negotiations and, in the eyes of the White House, opportunities to work together going forward. Anna.
Ambassador, a quick final thought on that.
I'm all for negotiations. I think this is a goodwill gesture, but they have to be negotiations that lead to a lasting peace. They can't be capitulation. They can't be appeasement just because you like Vladimir Putin. And I hope they get serious about an enduring peace, not just giving Putin everything he wants.